culture of Nagorno-Karabakh includes artifacts of tangible and intangible culture that has been historically associated with Nagorno-Karabakh and Artsakh, a historical province in the southern Caucasus, most of which is controlled by the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. These include monuments of religious and civil architecture, memorial and defense structures, and various forms of art. General information: Nagorno-Karabakh and adjacent territories belonging to historical Artsakh has been called an open-sky treasure house of various forms of Armenian architecture. Overall, Nagorno-Karabakh hosts several thousand architectural artifacts and historical monuments in a larger sense. In addition to ecclesiastical structures, this number includes samples of civil architecture, ancient castles and fortresses, as well as numerous khachkars. The art and architecture created in Nagorno-Karabakh has progressed through the same major stages as did Armenian art in a larger sense. They began developing in the pre-Christian times, proceeded through the adoption of Christianity early in the 4th century, and entered the era of modernity after blossoming in the Middle Ages. The principal expression of Artsakh's art in the Middle Ages was through ecclesiastical architecture, churches, cathedrals, chapels and monasteries. Most other forms of art in the period, including illuminated manuscripts, khachkars and mural paintings, were likewise tied to Artsakh's religious life and its primary institution, the Armenian Apostolic Church. Works of architecture in Nagorno-Karabakh are constructed according to similar principles and with the use of the same techniques as those in the rest of Armenia. Limestone is the principal building materials that form the nucleus for the walls. They are then covered with facing or platted with volcanic tuff rock slabs. In large buildings in cities or in monasteries, the exterior facing can consist of carefully cut blocks of tuff. The monasteries of Gandzis and Dadivank serve as the primary examples of that style. For more modest structures, such as parish churches in provinces, it was common to use less carefully cut stone, a practice which creates a more rustic appearance. Names of monasteries in Nagorno-Karabakh, like in the rest of historical Artsakh and Armenia, customarily include the term vank, which means monastery. Examples: Dadivank, Jitishavank, Kunisavank, Kardavank, Katravank, Yeritsmankansvank, etc. Monasteries are often located in or near settlements that bear the name Vank. The most notable cases include Dadivank Monastery, Gandzis Monastery and Spidakkarvank Monastery. Names of castles and fortresses in Nagorno-Karabakh, like in the rest of historical Artsakh and Armenia, customarily include the term bird, which means fort. Examples: Jabid, Handabid, Merabad, Kokhanabad, etc. Historical monuments of the pre-Christian era. The earliest monuments in Artsakh relate to the pre-Christian era, when polytheism was the most widespread form of religion. The most curious art form from the time period is perhaps large anthropomorphic stone idols that are found in the eastern lowlands of the northern counties of Jabid and Khakan. They date from the Iron Age. In the northeastern outskirts of the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, and further to the east, so-called Samanikas are found. They originally appeared during the reign of the Artashassian royal dynasty in Armenia, who used the stones, with inscriptions, to demarcate the kingdom's frontiers for travelers. In Artsakh, the tradition of marking borders with Samanikas endured throughout the Middle Ages. The largest of such medieval markers stands near the town of Matagas in the Mardekert district. An inscription on the stone declares, "Here Sarnikans." Monasteries, churches and chapels in and around Nagorno-Karabakh. In the early Middle Ages, Artsakh and neighboring provinces of Utik and Patakarin, known together as the eastern prefectures of Armenia, became a target of missionary activities of prominent religious leaders from Armenian mainland. The most distinguished of them were St. Gregory the Illuminator, who baptized Armenia into the first Christian state in 301 AD, and St. Mesrop Mashtots the scholar who created the Armenian alphabet. A number of Christian monuments that are identified with that vital period of the Armenian history belong to the world's oldest places of Christian worship. Among them is the Amaras Monastery, which, according to ancient authors, such as the forefather of Armenian history Movses Khorenatsi, was founded in the 4th century AD by St. Gregory himself. The oldest part of the monastery is the martyrium of St. Grigoris Street, Gregory's grandson and bishop of Igvank, who was killed by the pagans around 338 AD, when teaching gospel in the land of the Mazkuts. The mausoleum of St. Grigoris is a vaulted burial chamber equipped with 2 lateral vestibules that serves as the crypt for a church dating from a later period. Amaras is an active monastery of the Armenian Apostolic Church. While traveling in Artsakh and the neighboring provinces of Sardik and Utik in circa 410 AD, St. Mesrop Mashtots established a school at Amaras where the Armenian script, invented by him in 405 AD, was first introduced for teaching purposes. For 35 years until his death in 440, Mashtots recruited teams of monks to translate the religious, scientific and literary masterpieces of the ancient world into this new alphabet. Much of the work was conducted in the monastery at Amaras. The description of St. Mesrop Mashtots' journey to Artsakh and the neighboring province of Utik is a focal point of several chapters of the history of Igvank, written in the 7th century by one of Artsakh's most prominent natives, Armenian historian Movses Khygan Kathvatsi. Another temple whose history relates to the mission of St. Mesrop Mashtots is the Tagmanchats monastery near Karhat. The word Tagmanchats, meaning St. Translators, designates both St. Mesrop Mashtots and St. Sahak Partev, head of the Armenian Church who sponsored Mashtots' scholarly and religious expeditions. Using Mashtots' alphabet, Street, Sahak Partev translated the Bible from Syriac into Armenian in 411 AD. The main church of the monastery, reconstructed in 989, consists of one vaulted room with an apse on the east flanked by 2 small rooms. The Basilica of St. Gevorg at the Zitsnavank monastery in Kashata is not only an important religious site, but is the best preserved example of an Armenian basilica with 3 naves. It is a large and well-preserved structure dating probably from the 5th or 6th centuries. It stands not far from the so-called Lakan Corridor, a territory that connects Armenia with the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. The word Zitsnavank originates from the root Zitzin, meaning little finger in Old Armenian. This points to a period in the history of the monastery when it was believed to contain relics of St. George the Dragon Slayer. In the past, the monastery belonged to the Tatev eparchy and is mentioned as a notable religious center by the 13th century historians Stefano Zorbilian and Bishop Tofma Vanamdazi in 1655. Beginning from 1992, the Zitsnavank monastery underwent renovation and became a venue of autumn festivals organized annually on St. George's Day. Zitsnavank is an active monastery of the Armenian Apostolic Church. Churches with a cupola built on a radiating a cruciform floor plan were numerous in Armenia during the 7th century, and are well represented in Artsakh. One example is the chapel at Vankazar, where the cupola and its drum rest on the central square of a cruciform floor plan. The chapel is located on the eastern frontier of the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, and was reputedly founded by Artsak's celebrated monarch Vachagan II to the pious of the early medieval Aran Shahid dynasty. Another example is the Okhtatiareni church at Mokrines, probably dating from the 5th to 7th centuries. Its walls, roughly cut and bonded, enclose a quatrefoil interior with 4 small diagonal niches. Less common is the free cross plan with a cupola, found in the chapel of St. Saviour in the Mardekert district. Artsak's designs at times differed from the course of the architectural evolution of mainland Armenia. Observations suggest that certain floor plans frequently employed in other regions of Armenia during the 7th century are not found in Artsak. These include the chamber with a cupola supported by wall braces, the cruciform plan with a cupola on 4 freestanding pillars, and the radiating type with 4 rooms in a rectangle. Another peculiarity of the region is that few of Artsak's monuments date from the post-Arab period of the rise of Armenian kingdoms, which was a very productive artistic era in other Armenian provinces. The structures that could be attributed to that period are chapels on the cruciform plan with a cupola, such as the church at Varazgum near Kashata, the Kunisavank monastery in Getabaks, and churches with a single nave, such as the church in Parissos. It was during the post-Seljuk period and the beginning of the Mongol period when Artsak's architecture blossomed. Monasteries in this era served as active centers of art and scholarship. Most of them contained scriptoria where manuscripts were copied and illuminated. They also were fortified and often served as places of refuge for the population in times of trouble. Several monastic churches from this period adopted the model used most widely throughout Armenia, a cathedral with a cupola in the inscribed cross plan with 2 or 4 angular chambers. Examples include the largest and most complex monasteries of Artsak, Dadivank, Gansizar and Getishavank. In the case of the Gansizar and Getishavank monasteries, the cone over the cupola is umbrella-shaped, a picturesque design that was originally developed by the architects of Armenia's former capital city of Ani in the 10th century, and subsequently spread to other provinces of the country, including Artsak. Like all Armenian monasteries, those in Artsak reveal great geometric rigor in the layout of buildings. In this regard, the 13th century's Dadivank, the largest monastic complex in Artsak and all of eastern Armenia, located in the northwestern corner of the Mardekert district, is a remarkable case. Dadivank was sufficiently well preserved to leave no doubt that it was one of the most complete monasteries in the entire Caucasus. With its memorial cathedral of the Holy Virgin in the center, Dadivank has approximately 20 different structures, which are divided into 4 groups: ecclesiastical, residential, defensive and ancillary. Dadivank is an active monastery of the Armenian Apostolic Church. A conspicuous characteristic of Armenian monastic architecture of the 13th century is the gavet. The gavets are special square halls usually attached to the western entrance of churches. They were very popular in large monastic complexes where they served as narthexes, assembly rooms and lecture halls, as well as vestibules for receiving pilgrims. Some appear as simple vaulted galleries open to the south, others have an asymmetrical vaulted room with pillars, or feature a quadrangular room, with 4 central pillars supporting a pyramidal dome. In another type of gavet, the vault is supported by a pair of crossed arches. In Horokvank and Biar-Ayatsin monasteries, the most famous gavet in Nagorno-Karabakh, though, is part of the Gansizar monastery. It was built in 1261 and is distinctive for its size and superior quality of workmanship. Its layout corresponds exactly to that of Habat and Mshakavank, 2 monasteries located in the northern part of today's today's Republic of Armenia. At the center of the ceiling, the cupola is illuminated by a central window which is adorned with the same stalactite ornaments as in Geged and Harashavank monasteries in the Republic of Armenia dating from the early 13th century. The Gansizar Monastery was the spiritual center of Karakum, the largest and most powerful principality in medieval Artsakh, by virtue of being home to the Catholic Ossate of Agvang, LSO known as the Holy See of Gansizar. Catholic Ossate of Agvang was one of the territorial subdivisions of the Armenian Apostolic Church. Gansizar's Cathedral of St. Hovhan Mkhrtich is one of the most well-known Armenian architectural monuments of all times. No surprise, Gansizar is #1 tourist attraction in the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. In its decor there are elements which related to three other monuments in Armenia from the early 13th century. The colonnade on the drum resembles that of Harashavank, and the Great Cross with a sculpture of crucifixion at the top of the facade is also found at Gecheres and Hovhanavank. Gansizar, an active monastery of the Armenian Apostolic Church. Gansizar and Dadivank are also well known for the bas-reliefs that embellished the domes and walls. After the Cathedral of St. Cross on the Lake Van, Gansizar contains the largest amount of sculpted decor compared to other architectural ensembles of Armenia. The most famous of Gansizar's sculptures are Adam and Eve, Jesus Christ, the lion who built both Gansizar and Dadivank, and the church wardens, each holding on his hands a miniature copy of the cathedral. In Dadivank, the most important bas-relief depicts the patrons of the monastery, whose stone images closely resemble those carved on the walls of the Habat, Gecheres and Harashavank monasteries in the Republic of Armenia. Although in this period the focus in Artsakh shifted to more complex structures, churches with a single nave continued to be built in large numbers. One example is the monastery of St. Yefishakil, which in Armenian means longing for water, in the historical county of Jabid, that has 8 single-nave chapels aligned from north to south. One of these chapels is a site of high importance for the Armenians, as it serves as a burial ground for Artsakh's 5th-century monarch King Vachagan II the Pious Saranshah, also known as Vachagan the Pious for his devotion to the Christian faith and support in building a large number of churches throughout the region. King Vachagan is an epic figure whose deeds are immortalized in many of Artsakh's legends and fairy tales. The most famous of those tells how Vachagan fell in love with the beautiful and clever Anahit, who then helped the young king defeat pagan invaders. After an interruption that lasted from the 14th to the 16th centuries, architecture flourished again. In the 17th century, many parish churches were built, and the monasteries, serving as bastions of spiritual, cultural and scholarly life, were restored and enlarged. The most notable of those is the Yeritsmankans monastery that was built around 1691 in the county of Jabid. The monastery was established by the feudal family of Melik Israelians, lords of Jabid, with an apparent purpose to rival the Holy See of Gansizar and its hereditary patrons, the Hasanjalalians, lords of Karakum. Artsakh's architecture of the 19th century is distinguished by a merger of innovation and the tradition of grand national monuments of the past. One example is the Cathedral of the Holy Saviour, also known as Gazantchetsos, because it was erected in the historical Gazantchetsos borough of Shusha. It stands in Shusha, former capital of Karabakh Khanate, and is among the largest Armenian churches ever erected. The cathedral's architectural forms were influenced by the designs of the ancient Cathedral of St. Echmiadzin, center of the Armenian Apostolic Church located to the west of Armenia's capital of Yerevan. After the Karabakh War, the cathedral underwent restoration and currently serves as an active house of worship of the Armenian Apostolic Church. In addition to the Cathedral of the Holy Saviour, Shusha hosted the Hermitage of Holy Virgins and 3 other Armenian churches: Holy Saviour Megritsits, St. Hovhan Kanakjam, and Holy Saviour Agalazos. In the 19th century, several Muslim monuments appear as well. They are linked to the emergence of the Karabakh Khanate, a short-lived Muslim-ruled principality in Karabakh. In the city of Shusha, 3 19th-century mosques were built, which, together with 2 Russian Orthodox chapels, are the only non-Armenian architectural monuments found on the territories comprising the former Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Region and today's Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. Monuments of civil architecture. For the 17th and 18th centuries, several palaces of Armenian Meliks should be noted, especially the palace of the Melik Baglarian family in Julistan, palace of the Melik Avanian family in Toho, palace of the Melik Natsakanian family in Getashan, palace of the Melik Haikazian family in Kashata, palace of the Melik Dolukanian family in Tuknikal, and, finally, palace of the Khan of Karabakh in the city of Shusha. Princely palaces from earlier epochs, while badly damaged by time, are equally if not more impressive. Among those preserved is the palace of the Dopian princes, lords of Zar, near Anabid. Artsak's medieval inns comprise a separate category of civil structures. The best preserved example of those is found near the town of Hadrat. Before its destruction in 1920, the main repository of the region's civil architecture was Shusha. In the late 19th century, Shusha became one of the largest cities in Caucasus. In 1913, it hosted more than 42,000 people. Shusha's architecture had its unique style and spirit. The special style synthesized designs used in building grand homes in Artsak's rural areas and elements of neoclassical European architecture. A quintessential example of Shusha's residential dwellings is the house of the Avnizins family. Shusha's administrative buildings of note include Royal College, Eparchial College, technical schools, summer and winter clubs of the City Hall, the Amharian Hospital, the Kandamirian Theatre, the Holy Virgin Women's College and Mariam Gukasian Nobility High School. Of these buildings, only Royal College and the Amharian Hospital survived the Turco-Muslim attack on the city in 1920. The best preserved examples of Artsak's rural civil architecture are found in historical settlements of Banansk, Getashan, Hadrat and Toho. History of vandalism and destruction. The first record of damage to historical monuments occurred during the early medieval period. During the Armenian-Persian War of 451–484 AD, the Amaras monastery was wrecked by Persian conquerors who sought to bring pagan practices back to Armenia. Later, in 821, Armenia was overrun by Arabs, and Amaras was plundered. In the same century, however, the monastery was rebuilt under the patronage of Prince Yesai, Lord of Dayak, who bravely fought against the invaders. In 1223, as testified by the bishop Stephanos Orbelian, Amaras was looted again, at this time, by the Mongols, who took with them St. Grigoris's crozier and a large golden cross decorated with 36 precious stones. According to Orbelian, the wife of the Mongolian leader, Byzantine Princess Despina, proposed to send the cross and the crozier to Constantinople. In 1387, Amaras and 10 other monasteries of Artsakh were attacked by Tamerlane's hordes from Central Asia. According to a local Armenian legend, Tamerlane destroyed Amaras and ordered his soldiers to make up a miles-long line from the monastery all the way to the river Arax. Tamerlane's soldiers were passing on the stones of the demolished buildings from one person to another and throwing them into the water to form a bridge. But as soon as the conquerors left the region, the legend says, the region's inhabitants rushed to the river, brought the stones back and rebuilt the monastery to its original state. It must have been at the time when Amaras' famous scriptorium was established, shortly after the Armenian genocide and the end of the Caucasus campaign in 1918. A pogrom instigated by the Muslim Azerbaijani population in 1920 resulted in the destruction of the entire Armenian quarter of the city, which had a devastating effect on city's architecture heritage and position as a major trade city and producer of silk in the 19th century. After the entry of Turco-Islamic nomads to Karabak's highlands in the 1750s, the city became divided into two parts, Armenian and Muslim. Although the Islamic Turkic tribesmen constituted a small percentage of the population of Artsakh's highlands, the largest concentration was in Shusha, where they lived in peace with the Armenian population there. However, during the early 20th century, the city's cosmopolitan and tolerant attitude began to fall apart, and became a venue of sporadic intercommunal violence. But it was in March 1920 when it received the deadliest blow of all. Aided by expeditionary Ottoman forces, armed Turco-Tatar bands burned and destroyed the Armenian section of the city, murdering most of its Armenian residents in the process, some 20,000 people in total. The city's 3 out of 5 Armenian churches were totally destroyed by the Turkic bands. Holy Saviour Megretsotz, Holy Saviour Agiltsotz, and Hermitage of Holy Virgins. The Cathedral of the Holy Saviour was desecrated and severely damaged, with as many as 7,000 buildings demolished. Shusha has never been restored to its former grandeur. Instead, it shrank, becoming a small town populated by Azerbaijanis. It stood in ruins from 1920 up to the mid-1960s, when the ruins of the city's Armenian half were bulldozed by orders from Baku and cheaply built apartment complexes were built on top of them. The Karabakh War likewise left its deep scars on the architectural face of Nagorno-Karabakh. The Azerbaijani army intentionally targeted Armenian Christian monuments for the purpose of their demolition, using, among a variety of means, heavy artillery and military airplanes. Both Amaras and Gand Sizar monasteries suffered in the process. Robert Bevan writes, the Azeri campaign against the Armenian enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh, which began in 1988, was accompanied by cultural cleansing that destroyed the Egazar monastery and 21 other churches. 2 out of the 3 mosques in the city of Shusha also suffered during the war when Armenian forces captured the town in 1992. The authorities of the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, however, are restoring at least one of the mosques, reportedly with some help from Iranian architects. Fortresses, castles and princely palaces. The fortresses of the region were usually built on hard-to-reach rocks or on the tips of mountains, using the rugged and heavily forested terrain of the region. Some of the fortresses in Nagorno-Karabakh include Jabid, Handabid, Kachagokabad, Shakaka, Julistan, Merabad, Togabid, Anabid, and Agkabad. These castles belonged to Artsakh's aristocratic families, safeguarding the domains against foreign invaders that came from the eastern steppes. The forts were established very early in the history of the region, and each successive generation of their custodians Armenians contributed to their improvement. When the Principality of Kharkon forged ties with the Kingdom of Cilicia, an independent Armenian state on the Mediterranean Sea that aided the Crusaders, a small number of Artsak's fortifications acquired a certain Cilician look as a result. The Handabad Castle, the traditional stronghold of the Vakhtami Dopian princes located in Karvacha, was rebuilt with a grant received from Cilicia's king Levon I, for that it was also known as Livonabad. Karabak's most remarkable pieces of fortifications, though, are the citadel of Shusha and Askaran fortress, backed by an intricate system of camps, recruiting centers, watchtowers and fortified beacons. Both belonged to the so-called Lesser Signet, which was one of Artsak's two main historical military districts responsible for defending the southern counties of Varanda and Dayak. When the citadel of Shusha was founded by Pana Ali Khan Javanshir, the founder of the Karabakh Khanate, its walls and other fortifications were built.